Based on declassified post-war reports, Vietnamese guerrilla forces carried out a strategy that Americans referred to as biological guerrilla warfare. At the top of the list of death was the bamboo pit viper. This snake possessed a perfect cloaking suit. Its green coloration blended completely with the canopy of the tropical rainforest. Medical documents recorded its venom as an extremely powerful hemotoxin, causing immediate necrosis. American soldiers were often attacked while pushing aside foliage to find their way. A single strike to the neck or face meant that blood vessels were destroyed from within before a field medic could be summoned. The height of brutality, however, lay in the way this animal was incorporated into tunnel defense tactics. In the Cu Chi tunnel system, guerrilla fighters often captured pit vipers and tied their tails inside hollow bamboo tubes or suspended them from the tunnel ceiling with thin cords. When American tunnel rats, the smallest and most daring soldiers, crawled into the darkness with a flashlight and a Colt 45, they were moving straight toward a prearranged death. A mere light touch was enough to agitate the snake and send it lunging at the victim. In a confined space of less than 1 square meter, venom and panic combined to create a psychological disaster, turning the tunnels into collective graves with no escape. Alongside this, the Malayan crate carried out a quieter form of killing. Its bite did not cause the severe pain or swelling typical of pit vipers, leading many American soldiers to underestimate it or remain unaware that they had been envenomed. The crate's neurotoxic venom silently paralyzed the diaphragm, causing victims to die from suffocation in their sleep. Many U.S. units were shocked to record unknown cause deaths in the morning, where a soldier lay motionless in a hammock, skin pale but face still calm. This deadly silence shattered the moral authority of a modern army, plunging it into jungle paranoia, firing indiscriminately at every bush under the belief that each leaf concealed a green death. Practical statistics indicated that the medical cost of treating and evacuating a snake envenomation case was 388% higher than that of a shrapnel wound, as it required medical evacuation helicopters and scarce specialized antivenoms. Vietnam's natural environment not only destroyed manpower, but also exhausted the enemy's logistical capacity. The extreme tension caused by these legless killers was only the beginning of a series of further humiliations that American soldiers had to endure. When they attempted to avoid dense undergrowth and withdraw to more open areas, or relied on the steel power of the formidable M48 tanks, they encountered another force, tiny armies that knew no fear, creatures capable of forcing an entire armored unit to retreat in helplessness. That was when the Red Ant Army appeared, turning steel armor into a human skin furnace. But the fear of these legless killers was only the first layer of hell. As American soldiers began to learn from experience, they tried to keep their distance from dense undergrowth, pulling back and placing their trust in the tens of millimeters thick steel armor of M48 Patton tanks or V100 armored vehicles. They believed that inside these steel masses weighing dozens of tons, they would be safe. Reality on the battlefields of central Vietnam and the outskirts of Saigon proved otherwise. There existed a tiny force, an army that knew no fear, capable of launching attacks that Americans described as a psychological disaster. Red Weaver ants, known among U.S. troops with bitter resentment as communist ants. Consider the data from a combat report of the U.S. 11th Almorid Cavalry Regiment. In some cases, entire seasoned tank crews were forced to abandon their vehicles, leaving behind weapons and advanced equipment simply because of a single colony of red ants. How could such small creatures defeat a mobile fortress? The answer lay in their extreme aggression and venom containing a very high concentration of formic acid. These ants did not hide. They actively attacked anything that intruded upon their territory. When American tanks knocked down bushes containing ant nests, tens of thousands of ants would rain down, pouring into gaps, hatches, and ventilation systems of the vehicles.
Inside the cramped, overheated, oil-scented interior of a tank, being bitten simultaneously by thousands of ants became a true humiliation ritual. American soldiers could not use rifles or grenades against them. The bites of red ants produced an intense burning pain, as if red-hot needles were being driven into the skin. Many soldiers fell into extreme panic, tearing off their clothing and jumping out of the vehicle in the middle of combat zones simply to escape the torment of the swarm. This represented a complete collapse of moral authority and military power, when weapons worth millions of dollars were rendered useless by creatures weighing less than a gram. The green hell did not stop there. It unleashed another blood-hungry parasite that any soldier who had waded through the swamps of the Mekong Delta or the streams of the Central Highlands learned to fear deeply: jungle leeches and land leeches. In the journals of U.S. military doctors, removing leeches from soldiers' bodies was a daily task, one that caused both physical and psychological exhaustion. These jungle leeches were as small as match heads, yet capable of slipping through boot seams, shoelace eyelets, and crawling into the most sensitive areas of a soldier's body. Most frightening of all was their secretion of an anticoagulant substance. Many U.S. soldiers recalled that they only realized they had been attacked when they saw blood soaking through their trousers, flowing continuously. Persistent blood loss, combined with polluted, muddy environments, led to severe ulcers that contemporary medicine referred to as jungle ulcers. These wounds could not heal in high humidity. They became infected and deteriorated, forcing thousands of soldiers to be medically evacuated each year. This was a silent but extraordinarily effective war of attrition waged by nature itself. The presence of red ant swarms and bloodthirsty leeches created what could be described as a biological panic syndrome. American forces began pouring thousands of tons of Agent Orange, not only to strip foliage, but also in the hope of exterminating these creatures. Yet Vietnam's natural environment proved more resilient than they expected. While the U.S. military struggled with insecticides and specialized boots, the opposing side, the people born of this land, lived in harmony with and even exploited these creatures to defend their homeland. But prepare yourself, because ants and leeches were still not the apex predators here. When darkness fell over the ancient forests, when cicadas fell silent and the air grew heavy, another primal fear emerged. That was when the true monsters stepped out of the shadows, beings capable of dragging a strong soldier into the deep forest without leaving a trace. We are speaking of the Indochinese tiger, the ghosts of the jungle that turned American night sentry duty into living nightmares.
But if you believed that red ants or venomous snakes marked the ultimate boundary of the green hell, then you are mistaken. As dusk fell over the ancient forests of the Central Highlands, a deadly atmosphere enveloped American units huddled inside fire bases or checkpoints along jungle trails. This was the moment when a primal predatory force emerged, one that required no modern weapons yet possessed the power to instill absolute terror even in the bravest soldiers: the Indochinese tiger. U.S. military archives recorded incidents that were initially dismissed as fiction, but in reality were genuine disasters. Most notable was a report from the night of December 22, 1968, on a hill near the Hoong River Valley. A group of U.S. Marines were sleeping in their bivouac sacks when a massive tiger weighing over 200 kilograms silently approached without being detected by a single sentry. It did not attack head-on. With the patience of an elite predator, it selected its target. The tiger seized one soldier and dragged him into the deep darkness of the jungle, leaving his comrades frozen in shock. This was not an isolated attack. Subsequent reports revealed that the roar of tigers and their presence became a form of unofficial psychological weapon.
American soldiers, already exhausted by combat against human enemies, now had to face a wild predator that viewed them as vulnerable prey. These incidents constituted a humiliation ritual inflicted upon U.S. military power. Soldiers armed to the teeth with M16 rifles and grenades became food for a jungle beast. Their authority was stripped away by the most primitive force of survival instinct. Why did Vietnamese tigers become so aggressive and seemingly inclined to hunt American soldiers? Military biologists suggested that constant gunfire and battlefields saturated with death altered the animal's behavior. Tigers began to regard humans as an accessible food source once other wildlife fled from the explosions. For American troops, every rustling bush at night was no longer just a Viet Cong gunman. It could also be a pair of glowing yellow eyes watching patiently for the smallest opening to end the life. Alongside these striped phantoms, Vietnam's jungles concealed other mobile meat-crushing machines, wild elephants. While American tanks struggled through mud and swamps, herds of wild elephants moved with overwhelming power across the most treacherous terrain. U.S. forces repeatedly faced what could be described as mass assaults by elephants whenever the animals perceived their territory to be violated by roaring engines. The force of several tons of flesh and bone could crush a jeep or destroy communication posts in moments. The presence of these large animals created a terrifying layer of pressure on soldiers' morale. They came to realize that no matter how many napalm bombs were dropped, they would never truly dominate this land. Vietnam's natural environment did not merely defend itself, it actively counterattacked. Statistical records indicated that fear of wild animal attacks drove rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, among troops operating deep in the jungle to unprecedented levels. They were haunted by nocturnal sounds, by the screams of comrades dragged into the forest, deaths for which bodies were never recovered. The journey into the green hell did not end there. If tigers and elephants were visible enemies, there remained another class of killers, hidden in murky pools, beneath rotting leaves, and even within the daily food consumed by American soldiers. We are about to enter the darkest chapter of the war, tropical diseases and the devastation wrought by microscopic parasites, forces that brought down tens of thousands of U.S. servicemen without a single shot being fired.
If ferocious tigers or wild elephants were visible phantoms that American soldiers could fire upon, then there existed another kind of killer concealed within every drop of water, every breath, and beneath the layers of mud on the battlefield. These were tropical diseases, identified in U.S. military medical reports as the greatest cause of death and depletion of manpower throughout the entire war. This was a silent disaster in which the world's most advanced weapons were rendered completely powerless by microscopic parasites. At the top of this blacklist was malaria. Declassified battlefield medical records show that at certain times, up to 50% of the personnel in a U.S. infantry unit were unable to fight because of malaria. Particularly dangerous was Plasmodium falciparum, a highly drug-resistant parasite prevalent in the deep forests of central Vietnam. American soldiers, accustomed to temperate climates, entered the humid hell of Vietnam and became vulnerable targets for Anopheles mosquitoes. Jungle malaria not only ravaged the body with violent chills, but also destroyed red blood cells, leaving soldiers so weakened that they could no longer lift their rifles. The inability of U.S. military medicine to control this disease became a scientific humiliation ritual. Although American troops were issued weekly prophylactic medication, the side effects of the drugs, combined with the harsh combat environment, rendered prevention nearly ineffective. Meanwhile, Vietnamese guerrilla fighters, drawing on folk knowledge and thousands of years of adaptation, used forest leaves and herbal remedies to ease symptoms. This contrast created a form of moral authority rooted in mastery of the land, where the invading force was rejected by the environment itself as a foreign organism. Yet hell still had one final layer. There existed a realm where the combination of treacherous terrain and prehistoric creatures would chill anyone to the core. When American soldiers attempted to withdraw from the jungles towards the perceived safety of the sea or major rivers, they encountered the true monsters of southern waterways, saltwater crocodiles and massive pythons capable of crushing human bones within minutes. Our final chapter will reveal mysterious disappearances and bloody encounters with the undisputed kings of the swamps. When American soldiers attempted to escape the encirclement of the green hell on land, they often turned toward rivers, streams, or mangrove swamps in the hope of finding relief. Reality, however, delivered a brutal slap to that belief. In the southern river estuaries and the mangrove forests of Rung Sat, U.S. SEALs were forced to confront prehistoric creatures against which modern firearms were sometimes little more than harmless toys: the saltwater crocodile. In declassified files of the U.S. Navy SEALs, there are chilling reports of nighttime encounters in murky waters. Saltwater crocodiles in Vietnam during that period were opportunistic and extremely aggressive predators. They did not attack with gunfire or explosions. They attacked with absolute silence. A soldier sitting on a motorized boat or wading waist-deep in water could vanish instantly after a single strike and the species' characteristic death roll. This was an ultimate humiliation ritual. A warrior trained to counter advanced military doctrines, meeting his end in the jaws of a prehistoric creature. The authority of a superpower was crushed beneath the muddy water. Alongside crocodiles, massive reticulated pythons also contributed to the list of mysterious disappearances. Reaching lengths of up to 7 or 8 meters, reticulated pythons do not rely on venom, they rely on sheer muscular strength. There were records of patrols discovering scattered gear and M16 rifles lying beside long drag marks in the mud, yet with no trace of the soldier himself. These vanishings without evidence created a primal panic syndrome, making American troops feel that they were fighting in a world where they no longer stood at the top of the food chain. The combined presence of venomous snakes, fire ants, ferocious tigers, disease, and swamp monsters produced a comprehensive disaster for the U.S. military. Final statistics showed that Vietnam's natural environment inflicted such severe losses in manpower and mental health that it fundamentally altered the world's perception of jungle warfare. This was not merely a military defeat, but the failure of a mindset that underestimated moral authority, the natural authority of the land itself. Americans brought bombs and bullets to change this land, but it was the land that changed and ultimately broke them. Looking back at history, we see that the most dangerous creatures in Vietnam were not merely biological threats. They were ruthless ambassadors of a native civilization defending itself. American soldiers fought an adversary backed by forests, rivers, and wild beasts alike. The lesson from the Vietnam battlefield remains relevant today. In war, technology may provide an advantage in firepower, but true survival is determined by understanding and respecting nature. The American soldiers who returned from that war could never forget the hiss of pit vipers, the roar of tigers in the night, or the stifling heat of jungle malaria. They learned a bitter truth. There are lands before which even the mightiest empires must bow to the power of creation. If you felt a chill at the hardships these soldiers endured, hit like and subscribe right now. We will continue to decode the darkest mysteries of history and wars not found in textbooks. Leave a comment about which creature terrified you the most. Together, we will push towards 6 million subscribers so that the truth is never forgotten. See you again on our next decoding journey.